So some questions I want you to think about. Why did Chief Roundhead, the Wyandotte chief, why did he kill his brother Leatherlips? He condemned his brother Leatherlips to death. Chief Roundhead, he was at the Battle of Frenchtown, with James M. Meade. The name of the Kentuckian who claims to have murdered Tecumseh, we gotta figure that out. And John J. Hardin's Indian campaigns. So let's get to it. Stiata, Roundhead, Chief Roundhead, stripped him of his uniform before handing him to the British, which led to the legend that he was captured in his night shirt. So we got Winchester. This is the second Battle of Frenchtown. The American was scattered and not in any position to fight. The 17th Colonel, John Allen, was shot dead and he was scalped. So Allen County was named after a fucking colonel that was scalped to death. Where he was shot to death and then scalped later. Dozens tried to surrender and laid down their weapons only to be shot or tomahawked by the Indians. Members of the other units also tried to flee, but most were chased down and killed. A few removed their shoes and ran through the snow in their stockings to leave footprints that looked like moccasin and thus managed to escape. The British occupied a large barn which was set on fire by William Orlando Butler, forcing them from their shelter. The 1st, 5th Kentucky Rifle Regiments and the 1st Volunteers continued to hold the town. At the cost of 5 killed and 40 wounded, they had killed or wounded all but one member of the gun crews manning the 3 cannon in the center of the British line. 13 of the 16-man howitzer crew, as well as many infantry, but they were finally running out of ammunition after being repulsed 3 attacks. Winchester was urged by Proctor to order his remaining men to surrender, otherwise they'd be all killed and Frenchtown burned to the ground. Proctor demanded unconditional surrender and refused Winchester's counter-proposal since Winchester was already his prisoner. Major George Madison, an American officer still on the battlefield, persuaded Proctor to accept a surrender on the condition that all would be protected as prisoners of war. When they saw the British waving a white flag, the Kentucky riflemen thought it meant a call for a truce. Unfortunately, a British officer gave them an order to surrender from General James Winchester. They refused, said they would fight to the death rather than trust the Indians, but George Madison issued a formal declaration of surrender. After about 3 more hours of fighting, the British made several attempts to persuade the Indians to destroy Frenchtown, but the Potawatomi refused to allow this since they had given the land to the settlers and did not wish to inflict more harm on them. So they want to try to say that it was this horrible Indian massacre, but actually the Potawatomis, they showed restraint and they did not burn and destroy the entire town, even though they had the Kentuckians on the ropes and the British was wanting the Indians to destroy them. Tecumseh, he commanded the native forces that fought in the battle, but he was not in Frenchtown during the battle or massacre. I heard that Tecumseh was born in Kentucky. Puck Shinwa, his father, was born in Kentucky, and I think it was at Skippakitaki, so the last Shawnee stronghold. The Shawnee are descendants of the people, the pre-contact Fort Ancient peoples. The Shawnee traditionally considered the Lenape or the Delaware of the East Coast Mid-Atlantic region, who are also Algonquin speaking as their grandfathers. So the Shawnee looked at the Delaware as their grandfathers. The Algonquin nations of present-day Canada regard the Shawnee as their southernmost branch. Along the East Coast, the Algonquin-speaking tribes were mostly located in coastal areas from Quebec to the Carolinas. Algonquin languages have words similar to the archaic Shawano, now Shawawa, meaning south. However, the stem Shawa does not mean south in Shawnee, but moderate, warm of weather. One Shawnee tale, Shawaki is the deity, the south of the south, the deity of the south. So Shawaki, Shawnee, Shawaki. The Shawnee were driven from Kentucky in the 1670s by the Iroquois of Pennsylvania and New York, who claimed the Ohio Valley as hunting ground to supply its fur trade. 1780, a British-American group were making salt at a ford in the Kentucky River. After Stephen Frank was killed, the settlers called it Frank's Ford, later to be shortened Frankfurt. Meanwhile, McAfee's doubtful claim to the area around Frankfurt lapsed. Lawsuits were filed in 1786. General James Wilkinson, a fellow soldier and friend of George Washington, who also, I think, wanted to get Kentucky to declare its independence and become a Spanish colony. Found himself in possession at a very cheap price of what is most downtown district of Frankfort, north of the Kentucky River. Wilkinson set to work on organizing the town. He chose the name Frankfort to honor the memory of a man named Stephen Frank, a Jewish pioneer who had been shot by Indians, possibly near a river crossing known as Frank's Ford. So that's interesting. Kentucky itself is an Indian name, and then Frankfort, it's not from Germany, but it's actually from Frank's Ford. Stephen Frank was a Jewish pioneer who got killed by Indians near a crossing that they called Frank's Ford. Now, the Indians that the Kentuckians had fought against in the Battle of Frenchtown were numerous and many. So there was about 200 Potawatomis in the very beginning, and then they ran away, and then they all came back. And so they came back with a huge entourage. So there was Shawnee, Potawatomi, Ottawa, Chippewa, Delaware, Miami, Winnebago, Creek, Sauk, and Fox. So Fox Indians. And so now they considered the Delaware their grandfathers, right? That's what the Delaware were the grandfathers of the Shawnee. So the Shawnee and the Delaware were a part of the Battle of Frenchtown. A little bit about the Shawnee, because we're going to learn about a little bit about each one of those groups that I just mentioned. So, who are the Shawnee? Who are the Potawatomi? Who are the Ottawa? Alright. So, Ottawa. Who are the Chippewa? Who are the Delaware? Who are the Miami? Who are the Winnebago? Who are the Creek? Who are the Sauk? S-A-U-K. Who are the Fox? Who are the Shawnee? And the Potawatomi. Okay, so let's find out. The Shawnee, of course, Tecumseh is the great Shawnee leader of, he was like the hero of the Northwest, or not a hero, he was, they talk in glowing terms how he was respected and how he was intelligent, was able to get the Indian Confederation going, but he winds up losing the battle. So, Puck-Shinwa, Tecumseh, both are Shawnee. Some scholars believe that the Shawnee are descendants of the people of the pre-contact Fort Ancient culture of the Ohio region, even though it's not universally accepted. Fort Ancient culture flourished from 1000 to 1650 CE among the people who predominantly inhabited lands along the Ohio River in areas of southern Ohio, northern Kentucky, and western West Virginia. The Fort Ancient culture was once thought to have been an expansion of the Mississippian culture. Scholars now believe Fort Ancient culture developed independently and was descended from the Hopewell culture, 100 BCE to 500 CE. They're also a mound builder culture. The group of cultures collectively called mound builders were succeeding pre-contact societies in North America who constructed various styles of complex, massive earthworks, earthen mounds for burial, elite residential and ceremonial purposes. These included the pre-Columbian cultures of the Archaic period, Woodland period of Dino, Hopewell, Fort Ancient culture, and the Mississippian cultures. They emerged as cultures from roughly 3000 BCE to the 16th century CE and lived in regions of the Great Lakes, the Ohio River Valley, and the Mississippi River Valley, and its tributaries extending into the southeast of the present-day United States. So the Shawnees, they came from, you know, the Hopewell culture, the Fort Ancient culture. They were the Hopewell culture, Fort Ancient culture. They're mound builders. They've been in Kentucky for thousands of years. It says the Hopewell culture was 1000 BCE. So while Jesus Christ was on the planet, you had the Shawnee who was running around Kentucky, and it's Puck-Shinwa, the Prophet, and Black Hoof. Potawatomi. The Potawatomi, also spelled Potawatomi and Potawatomi. They're Native American people of the upper Mississippi River region. They traditionally speak the Potawatomi language, a member of the Algonquin family. In the Potawatomi language, they generally call themselves Bodo-Wadmi, a name that means keepers of the fire, and that was applied to them by their Ojibwe brothers. They originally called themselves Nesnabia cognate of the word Anishinaabe. Oh my God. So, okay, the Potawatomi were part of a long-term alliance called the Council of the Three Fires. So I think that's a good question. What is the Council of the Three Fires? And so that's the Potawatomi. That's one of the tribes. And also the Chippewa and the Ottawa. So these, the Council of the Three Fires, that's why you had the Chippewa and the Ottawa, who are all there together with the Potawatomis. So the Council of the Three Fires was Chippewa, Ottawa, Potawatomi. In the Council of the Three Fires, the Potawatomi were considered the youngest brother. The Potawatomi were first mentioned in French records, which suggests that in early 17th century they lived in what is now southwestern Michigan. During the Beaver Wars, they fled to the area around Green Bay to escape attacks by both the Iroquois and the Neutral Nation, who were seeking expanded hunting grounds. As an important part of Tecumseh's Confederacy, Potawatomi warriors took part in Tecumseh's War, the War of 1812, and the Peoria War. Their allegiance switched repeatedly between the British and the Americans as power relations shifted between the nations. At the time of the War of 1812, a band of Potawatomi inhabited the area near Fort Dearborn in the current location of Chicago, led by Chiefs Blackbird and Nuscotomeg. Mad Sturgeon, a force of about 500 warriors, attacked the evacuation column, leaving Fort Dearborn. They killed a majority of the civilians and 54 of Captain Nathan Held's force and wounded many others. George Ronan, the first graduate of West Point to become a fatal casualty in combat, was killed in this ambush. The incident is referred to as the Battle of Fort Dearborn. A Potawatomi chief named Muck Taipoki Black Partridge counseled against the attack and later saved some of the civilian captives who were being ransomed by the Potawatomi. So they're very much in the Indian Wars that's going on with the whites. The Prairie Band Potawatomi purchased 1,280 acres of land near Shabana, Illinois, in rural DeKalb County. The Meskwaki and other Algonquin people also bought land in Illinois, one of only states that allowed Indians to purchase land. Another band, the Potawatomi, had land in Crown Point, Indiana. Today, the Potawatomi are a thriving community, building their community in southwestern Michigan. They provide health services and education to the people with revenues generated from the tribe's gaming and other business operations. So the Potawatomi are still around today in Illinois, Indiana, Crown Point, Indiana, Shabana, Illinois. So some of the natives were actually able to survive, and stay there. So Potawatomi, they are one of those tribes. Ottawa, the capital of Canada and the first largest city in the country. The city stands on the south bank of the Ottawa River in the eastern portion of southern Ontario. Ottawa borders Quebec, Gatineau. Together they form the National Capital Region. Founded in 1826 as Bytown, incorporated as Ottawa in 1855. The city has evolved into the political and technological center of Canada. Its original boundaries were expanded through numerous minor annexations and ultimately replaced by a new city incorporation, major amalgamation. In 2001, would significantly increase its land area. The name Ottawa is derived from the Algonquin word "Attaway," meaning to trade. Initially an Irish and French Christian settlement, Ottawa has become a multicultural city with a diverse population. 2001 census had the city's population at 883,000. Second highest quality of living of any large city in the Americas, 14th highest in the world, the cleanest city, second cleanest city in Canada, third cleanest in the world. City is ranked for the third consecutive year as the best community in Canada to live in by money since. So, Ottawa is named because of the Ottawa, right? It was initially an Irish and French Christian settlement. So the Ottawa Indians, to mean traders, Native American, First Nations people, they're one of the Anishinaabe, related to but distinct from the Ojibwe Nation. The original homelands are located in the Manitoulin Island near the northern shores of Lake Huron, or on the Bruce Peninsula in the present-day province of Ontario, Canada, and the state of Michigan, United States. So the Ottawas come from Michigan. There's 15,000 Ottawa living in Ontario, Michigan, and Oklahoma. The Ottawa language is considered a divergent dialect of the Ojibwe, characterized by frequent syncope. The Ottawa language, like the Ojibwe language, is part of the Algonquin language family. They also have so they're all Algonquin language speakers. All these tribes are, right? So we're going to learn more about Winnebago, how it's not really the Winnebago. We need to actually call them by their own names. Talgayita, Hanadagayas is what George Washington was called. Cannot talk Carius, Hanadagayas.